what are we learning about this flight?
Well, so what we know from the FAA, this was Dynamic International Airways Flight 405, and the belief is obviously that it caught fire here in taxiway B as it was moving or taxiing towards a runway for departure. The plane was going to Venezuela, Caracas, Venezuela. This all happening around 12:45 this afternoon. Now, according to the FAA, the flight was taxiing when pilots of another aircraft noticed that fuel was leaking and alerted the pilots on board this plane that there was fuel coming out of somewhere on the aircraft, and that preceded this fire. So, and then, of course, we see the fire here looks to have centered around one of the engines. According to the FAA website, that is a Pratt & Whitney engine. This is a 767 aircraft. I called the airline, this is an airline that appears to primarily deal with flights to Venezuela. It is a small airline. They lease this airplane from a company in Salt Lake City, according to the FAA website. But basically here, the plane was on a taxiway moving out towards the runway to depart this afternoon at Fort Lauderdale. There was fuel seen leaking from the aircraft before the fire started. Passengers then evacuated through the emergency exit slides, which you can see there. No word on injuries, but from the video we saw, I watched people walking away from the aircraft, so it looks like people were able to get out of here, get out of this airplane pretty quickly once they saw that it was on fire. You know, engine fires are really rare. The engines are designed to contain, if there's a failure, to keep that inside the engine. Of course, you know, when you're looking to depart, you are full of fuel. You're heavy, if you will, because you're loaded down with fuel for the flight, as well as the passengers and the luggage and everything. So that is certainly a danger element there, because there's a lot of fuel on board that airplane. And here, fuel coming out, leaking out of the aircraft is not what you want to see. That raises some questions about the maintenance of the aircraft and when it was last checked. And that, of course, will be part of the investigation now, is what was the maintenance like on this aircraft, and what are the maintenance practices at this small airline.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting to a lot of people who get on planes every single day and are nervous flyers, for example, like me. We know that the pilots do walk around the plane before they get into the cockpit, and we know that the maintenance crews are there on the ground. Also, the question obviously becomes how soon. We know we've sat on planes for hours and hours while we wait to take off. How soon after the pilots did their walk around did this fuel start to leak? And then, luckily, other pilots who were either in the area or behind that aircraft saw that fuel leaking, was able to notify the pilot of it. Certainly that raises a concern and a worry.
Yeah, you don't want fuel leaking from your aircraft. I mean, that is an obvious issue here, that now when you begin an investigation, you're going to look at where did the break happen, and what does and why wasn't that caught before the plane got on the taxiway. And of course, sometimes things break in process, so it is certainly possible that when the pilot did the walk around, there was not a leak, and whatever failed between when the pilot did that and they pushed back from the gate and got onto the taxiway. The good news is about the taxiway, it's not like this plane was moving terribly quickly at the time, and it was not like we saw with the British Airways engine fire in September, where that plane was in the process of taking off. This plane was not really going at a fast rate here. It was not at the point where the engines were revving full bore, so it was relatively easy to stop this aircraft. And then, air crews are trained to be able to evacuate an aircraft within 90 seconds with half of the exits blocked. And certainly, you're not going to use the overwing exits if the engines are on fire. So here you had a circumstance where you had many of the exits essentially taken out of the mix here, and people were still able to get off. As we're looking live at some of the damage now here on CBSN, you can see that clearly that looks like the left engine is the one that ended up catching fire, and then the heat that would be generated from that alone, we saw in the 777 fire, the British Airways fire, melted into the metal of the body of the aircraft. So you certainly want to get everybody off as quickly as you can.
For sure. And in fact,
Chris,
Kris,
can be done in 90 seconds or less.